Hey, everybody, welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. I'm Christy Brower here with my co host, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
I'm good.
Good. Are
Yeah.
you ready for a case I've been refusing to tell her? This is not exactly a cold read in that this is a case we are familiar with, but what I'm going to ask Katie to read for us is it doesn't matter. But I told her I wasn't going to tell her until we got on the show. So, are you
Mhm.
nervous? Are you biting your nails? What are you
I'm
thinking?
excited. This might
Yeah,
be after what we've been through, the past 6 months with cases. I feel like there's nothing that could surprise me too much. But then again, hold your beer, right?
right, exactly. And this case is, I would consider this case local to us because it happened, well, it originated in West Valley City, Utah, which is a suburb of Salt Lake City that's 3 hours from us. And we are sort of just the, what do you want to say, the Idaho leg of Salt Lake City, kind of like
Mhm.
it's the biggest metropolitan area to us, and so we're very, familiar and comfortable with Salt Lake and have been there many times in our lives. And so there's that connection of I-15 that just connects our area to Salt Lake, and so it does sort of feel local to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are going to talk today about this Susan Powell case.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Susan Powell case is it is officially unsolved. It is closed, but it is not solved. Um, it is, well, I'm just going to have to tell you the story because it's such a wacko, bonkers story. So I want to tell the whole story.
Okay.
And then I have some specific questions for you about the story. So some of you may know this story. This was very famous. It happened 10 years ago. Susan Powell has never been found. She is one of the reasons that this case is not closed is that her body has never been found. She has not been declared dead, even though she's been gone for 10 years. And, authorities truly believe that they know what's happened to her, but they can't prove it. So
Okay.
here we go. I'm going to give you some info. So Susan Cox Powell went missing from West Valley City, Utah, on, where did I lose this? Oh, December 6th, 2009. She has two sons, Charles and Braden, and her husband, Joshua Powell. So this was a really famous case when she went missing, a huge manhunt for her. There was a ton of pressure. This was one of the first cases that I remember as an adult that like it went across the nation, and there was a lot of pressure over the, to the local authorities to keep this case going and to find her. There was immediate suspicion on her husband, Josh Powell, who was named a person of interest in her disappearance almost immediately, but he never was charged. So let's get into this a little bit. So on the morning of December 6th, 2009, Susan and Josh and their children were Mormons, members of the LDS Church. Susan and her boys, Charles and Braden, they went to church that morning. And a neighbor came and saw them in the afternoon. And that neighbor left about 5 p.m. And that is the last time anyone saw Susan alive. So on December 7th, the next day, the entire Powell family was reported missing. So this started out as this huge thing like, oh my God, a whole family has gone missing. So Josh, the two boys, and Susan, because no one brought the boys to daycare, and Susan and Josh didn't show up at work, and no one called in. So some family members were contacted, and they called the police because they were like, how, this whole family is missing. Police went to the house. They broke into the house because they thought at the time maybe they died of a carbon monoxide poisoning, or they were murdered in their beds or something.
Right.
So they go into the house and they find nothing. No one's there. Although, strangely, and this is in December in Utah, it's cold,
Oh,
snow,
yeah.
you know. There were 2 box fans blowing in the living room on a wet spot on the couch. Seemed weird.
Mm-hmm.
Susan's purse, wallet, everything, her ID were in the house. Her cell phone was later found in the family's vehicle, which was a minivan. So about 5 p.m. that day, Josh shows up at home with the boys. And the police take him right in for questioning because they just know something is up. This is not right. Something's weird.
Right.
And here they show up back home without the wife. So this is the story that he told. And this is, if you live in Idaho or Utah in December, you know how crazy this story is. He said that he left Susan at home in bed and took their 2 little boys camping to Simpson Springs, which is in western Utah. It was literally blizzarding that night when he said that. No way in hell anybody was going camping. They actually went and visited the campsite a few days later. Didn't see any evidence that anyone had been camping there. No duh.
Yeah.
So they did find that really suspicious. That story just didn't make any sense that he would take the boys camping at midnight. Also, he was supposed to be at work the next day.
Right.
He hadn't called off, nothing. Like he just,
no showed work, no show daycare. Yeah.
Yeah, just suddenly they disappear in the middle of the night and it's because they're going camping in December. Didn't make much sense. So the police search their house. They find some traces of Susan's blood on the floor. They also find that there was several life insurance policies in Susan's name, equaling about $1.5 million. They also found a letter that Susan had written expressing fear for her life. She literally said, "If I turn up dead, it was not an accident, even if my husband says it is."
Yeah.
Because they'd been having major problems. They were having
Right.
major financial problems. They were having major marital problems.
Mm-hmm.
He run up huge amounts of debt, major issues going on in the relationship. So they did some DNA, which didn't get released until 2013. And I'll tell you why. A lot of things didn't get released about this case until 2013. But they did match a blood sample to Susan that was in the house. There was another sample that they matched to an unknown male contributor. Very key, I think. So in August of 2012, remember, she's been missing since 2009. No sign of her. She never turned up anywhere. They've not found her body. The police released some stuff about the really highly suspicious behavior of Josh after her disappearance. So he did some really sketchy stuff. He liquidated her retirement accounts. He canceled a bunch of doctor's appointments and things that she had. He pulled their kids out of daycare. And they interviewed some of his coworkers who said he had talked to them about how to hide a body out in a mine shaft in the western Utah desert. Remember that the campground he supposedly went to was in the western Utah desert. So they had a lot of stuff that pointed to he did something to her.
Yeah.
But they didn't have any proof. So they did talk to the kids at some point. Older son, Charlie, he did say that, yes, they did go on the camping trip, but he also said that mom went with them and then she didn't come back with them. A few weeks after he was missing, there was a teacher that was one of Charlie's teachers who said that Charlie told her that his mother was dead. And Susan's parents said that Braden, the younger one, while at daycare, drew a picture of a van with 3 people in it and told the people at the daycare that mommy was in the trunk. So the boys were little, daycare age, not elementary age.
Yeah.
But they knew something had gone awry. So at this point, the police say they're going to question him again. There was all this stuff that went on back and forth. They would question him. They would search where he was living. It went round and round literally for years, in which at no time did anything come up about her location. There were tons and tons of media interviews with Josh. The police combed through all of that. Finally, at this point, this is in 2012, he gets an attorney, and he started getting really uncooperative. He moved at that time also to Washington, to Puyallup, where his dad, Stephen, was living. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dad Stephen. At one point, after Josh and Susan were married, they lived with Stephen for a short time. And while they were living there, Stephen became very infatuated with Susan, to the point of filming her without her knowledge, following her, stalking her. Yeah, really creepy stuff. Way worse came out later.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, at some point, he propositions her, and she freaks out, and they move out. And that's when they moved to West Valley City. They moved away. So after, it's really clear, but this again has taken years. Okay. She disappeared in 2009. Finally in 2012, the police are finally, saying, okay, we're really going to make a move on this guy. This is one of those cases where you go, what the hell were they doing for all that amount of time?
Yeah.
So they went to Puyallup and moved in with his dad. To get out of the area, I really think, because the police were really starting to look at him. So he also had lost his job at that point. So about that time, there was this website. Do you remember this, Katie? SusanPowell.org. This website, oh my gosh, it was said to be the official website of Susan Powell. Well, it was all about how there was this smear campaign against Josh on the part of Susan's family, and that there were just people out to get him. Oh, and also that it was the LDS Church out to get him, which that matters because Stephen, Josh's dad, hated the LDS Church and was really, very against it. And so suddenly now the LDS Church is out to get Joshua as well. There were all kinds of stuff speculating all these crazy things about her disappearance. There was this guy, Stephen Coker, who was a journalist who went missing the same week as Susan. And so they tried to say that those two ran off to Brazil together. That was one of the potential outcomes that was on this website, which of course was absolutely no.
So just straight up propaganda.
Yeah, totally. People really believed that it was them, that was Steve, his dad and him doing that. Totally. Another time they claimed that Susan had abandoned her family due to mental illness and that she'd left with another man. There's absolutely no evidence of any of that at all. And if that were the case, you think she'd just disappear without a trace, without her purse, without her ID in her wallet, and never to see her children again. Yeah. Here's a clue. Most women would never do that, ever.
We're talking about a mother. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the police kind of find out about Stephen Powell being obsessed with Susan. And so the police kind of start looking at him, wondering what's going on. So they serve a search warrant on his house in Washington, and they do this huge search, and they find 4,500 images of Susan on his computer, all taken without her knowledge, including close-ups of specific body parts, like taking pictures of her in the shower and stuff. It was really cool.
Wow.
So at that time, they also start looking at Josh's brother, Michael, because about the time that Susan went missing, he sold his car. It was an old Ford Taurus to a wrecking yard in Pendleton, Oregon. Again, he didn't live in Pendleton, Oregon. He lived in Washington. So it was a weird, why would you go that far away to sell your car to a junkyard? Anyway, so they got satellite images of that lot. They found the car, and they took a police dog there. And the sniffer dog that they used indicated decomp in the trunk of the car. They were not able to get any conclusive DNA. But again, there's so much circumstantial evidence. There's so much piling up on this, but never quite enough,
Yeah.
In 2011, and this whole time they're looking and they're trying. I don't mean to malign the police too much, but it just seems crazy to me that this never came to anything.
Yeah.
They went to a place called Topaz Mountain, which is in the desert. It's near Nephi, which is southern Utah. And it was a place that Joshua liked to camp because they discovered what could have possibly been a grave site there. There was signs that somebody had been digging there. When they dug a few feet down, that they initially had a cadaver dog that showed on that site, but they couldn't find anything. Like maybe there had been something buried there that wasn't anymore. So there were thoughts that possibly she had been buried there at one point and then been moved, but again, absolutely no proof. They could find nothing to actually test to prove that. All they know is that potentially there had been something dead there that wasn't there anymore. So the Powell family and then Susan's family, the Cox family, were very hostile. And, the Cox family 100% blames Josh for this.
Yeah.
And so, of course, Stephen, his dad, and Josh, they do all kinds of stuff to antagonize the Coxes. And, it was a big fight. And it was all over in the news when it was happening in like 2010 and 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Especially because then they came out with Josh and Stephen came out with this story that Susan was actually having an affair with Stephen and that they had been falling in love. And they had some journals that Susan wrote in when she was a teenager, and they used that as evidence to try to say that she was mentally ill, which was so screwed up and dumb. Right. And the Cox family was so upset and angry about this. They actually got a judge to issue an injunction to stop Joshua and Stephen from being able to publish those journals because they were publishing them. They were putting them out in the press and in the media and, saying, see, think about what any girl writes in her teenage journals. Sure. When you're an adult, you probably do look like you're crazy because you kind of are when you're a teenager. So they got an actual injunction against them to stop that. She was just sick. Like they've done everything they can to malign this poor woman who's, missing, presumed dead all this time. And all they can do is just be shitty about her. It's just so gross. It's so gross.
Yeah. So
then in 2012, 10, sorry, got to get my date. 11, in 2011, Stephen was arrested on charges of voyeurism and child pornography. They found evidence. So they were really keeping an eye on him after this whole, voyeurism stuff with
creepy
Susan.
As hell thing. Right.
Super creepy. So they found that he had been secretly videotaping women and young girls and that included Susan. So they also said that they were suspecting Joshua in the child pornography investigation. So Josh also, if you read anything about Josh's history, you know that his parents had a really tumultuous relationship, and dad was a total asshole, and he was exposing his young boys to pornography. And Josh had a lot of problems as a kid. He killed some gerbils on purpose that belonged to his sister, and he had a suicide attempt, and he had a lot of behavioral problems and mental health problems as a teenager. And you can look right back on that family and see why, and look at what dad had been up to all that time. So about the time that this happens, the Cox family, the Cox parents file for custody. Well, it's actually Susan Cox's dad, Chuck, files for custody of her kids, saying, they can't be there. That, this, we've got voyeurism and child pornography on the grandpa's part. They're questioning dad. They're wondering about him as well. Right. And so the court does actually give temporary custody to him. And they said that Josh would have to move out of Stephen's house if he wanted to get custody of his kids back. So Josh, being the truly stand-up guy that he did, he rented a house. But authorities, I think at this point, finally were hip to his bullshit because they kept an eye on him and found that he never actually moved into the house. He was just renting it. And so they wouldn't give the kids back. Some of Josh's family started to turn on him. His sister, Jennifer, said that she did really think that he was responsible for Susan's disappearance. His other sister, Alina, said that too, and then she kind of withdrew it. There was this case had so much drama for several years. It was like, it was in the news all the time. It's kind of like how the Daybell Vallow case is now. It was very similar to that there was tons of media around it all the time. Let's see. So So they just really kept feeling like they were getting really close to the point of being able to arrest him. And so they just kept pushing and kept pushing. They even had Josh do a bunch of court-ordered evaluations, trying to determine what kind of a human he is really, although I don't think any of us have any questions. They kind of came back and said he has some narcissistic personality traits and some paranoia, and he's not super awesome with his kids, but he's not mentally ill necessarily. So they decided that he should have visitation with his sons several times a week, supervised by a social worker. So he couldn't get him back, but he could see him. Sadly, this was a terrible choice. So in January of 2012, police discovered, because they just cannot stop. They're on him like crazy. So they discover 400 images of simulated child pornography, bestiality, and incest on his computer. The problem is these are hand-drawn, like cartoons of this disgusting stuff. And so although it further confirms for them that he is seriously screwed up, it's not illegal. So again, they're right on the edge and they can't do anything to him. So then of course, Josh and his brother, they start saying that Susan's family is abusing and neglecting the boys, and they're in collusion with child welfare, and everybody's out to get them. We've heard this story a million times, and that they're just harassing him over his wife's disappearance and all this crap. They've actually put up a Google website saying all this stuff. But I got to say, the Cox family, it's interesting that it's a Cox family, right? Because there's Cox family.
I was thinking that too.
In the Daybell Vallow case. These guys were absolute rock stars, because every time these jokers did something crappy, they just took them right to court. And they did it again and got that Google site taken down. Because again, they're just saying terrible lies. Not that any of this is about, actual missing human being, Susan Powell.
Right.
So then here's the culmination. On February 5th, 2012, I will never forget when this happened. I will never forget this, because I am a social worker and I'm also a foster adoptive parent. And so when this happened, this was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
So February 5th, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall calls 911. She's taken Charles and Braden to a supervised visit at Josh's house. So what happens is she's supposed to monitor the visit, and as he opens the door, grabs the kids, pulls them in, slams the door and locks it. Just slams it in her face and won't let her in.
Yeah.
And so she, she's like, holy shit, something is going down here. So she calls 911. Well, shortly after calling 911, the house explodes. Yeah. Blows up. Kills Josh and the two children. Just right there, Yeah. So, of course, the police come. They rule it as a murder-suicide because there's gasoline all over the house. Like, it was intentional. He had been prepared to set the house on fire. Although the children had wounds from a hatchet on their heads and faces. Like, he had actually been trying to kill them before the house blew up. And this all was just in a few minutes from the time that the social worker got locked out and called the police. It was just horrifying, because here, now we still don't know where Susan is. Now dad and sons are dead. Basically, the police confirm, that he planned it deliberately. It was a murder-suicide, and they fully believe that he did it to cover up the fact or to escape the fact that he had killed his wife. Yeah. Turns out that he
kind of, I don't think that's what it was about. I feel like this was just a good final big FU to the Cox family.
Right. I absolutely agree. He took the children away forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So apparently he'd sent a bunch of emails right before this happened saying goodbye. He sent instructions to one person about where his money was and how to turn off the utilities to his house. He had withdrawn $7,000 from his bank account, and he had donated his kids' toys and books to local charities the day before this happened. So it was 100% planned. He named his brother Michael as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, and his dad was in prison at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So now all we have left is Michael and Stephen, who may potentially know what happened or maybe even had been involved, right?
Yeah.
So a year later, on February 11th, so almost exactly a year later, a year and just a few days later after that, Michael killed himself. He took his own life in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was there at grad school, and he jumped off the roof of a parking garage.
Holy shit.
So here we have one more person that goes away, doesn't know, likely knew what happened to Susan Powell and where she is. So in May, in May of 2013, the West Valley City Police closed this active investigation into her disappearance. They basically said, we're quite sure her husband killed her. There's nothing we can do, and they closed her case.
Yeah.
There's been a book about this case called The Light in Dark Places. There's also, I think, several documentaries on this case at various stages of it. Some of them not all the way around, not all the way up to this point. Because let's see. So then there's been several court battles trying to determine Susan legally dead so they can collect her life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Done on the part of Josh Powell's family. I mean, how sick are these people? Again, Dad, Chuck Cox, sued on Susan's behalf and on Susan's estate and got control over her estate.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, Josh left his beneficiary as his brother Michael, which they were married.
Right.
And anyway,
Right.
So he did get that so that they gained full control of her estate so that they could not benefit financially. Seriously, after all this, his family was trying to benefit financially from her.
So the trail of benefits would have been then he was Susan's beneficiary because they were married. When he died, his brother became the beneficiary of him and Susan's estates.
Right.
When his brother died, then either dad or sister became the beneficiary of all three of those estates. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So even after all this, they're still trying to profit.
Yes.
So sick. The other thing that the Cox family did is they sued Washington Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS is what they call it in Washington, that they prioritized Joshua's parental rights over the safety of the kids and were complicit in their deaths.
Yeah.
So initially, the court ruled against the Coxes, and then this went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they reversed that ruling. And they did let it go to trial. So it did ultimately result in some changes for DSHS in Washington.
Mm-hmm. So wait, so it went to trial and they won?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically the state was just required to make some changes.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, it's not like, it wasn't a criminal trial, but it's a civil trial. But they changed some of their laws also in Washington and in Utah that to change visitation rights for parents who are being investigated for murder. Basically, if they're being investigated for murder, their visitation rights should be restricted to their children, which duh.
Yeah.
So Stephen Powell, Dad, remember, was still alive up to this point. Mm-hmm. He was released from prison in July of 2017. He served 7 years for voyeurism and child pornography. And he died of natural causes in July of 2018 without giving anybody information about what he knew.
Yeah.
So at this point, Susan does remain a missing person. She still has not been declared dead. It is, of course, believed that her husband did it, but we don't have definitive proof of that. I mean, we have tons of circumstantial proof, but not definitive. So my questions, Katie, and I know, holy shit, that's a big case. That's a lot to unpack. Did Josh Powell kill Susan? I'm just going to give you all my questions and then you can answer them as you want.
Okay.
Was Michael Powell involved in the death or in the disposal of her body?
Okay.
Was Dad involved or did he just know after the fact? And was Susan's body moved? Was it Susan's body up there on Topaz Mountain and they moved it, or was that something else? So those are my 4 questions for you, and anything else that you want to share, feel free.
All right. So yes, he killed Susan. Yes, he killed her in the house. Susan was trying to leave him. She tried to leave him a few times before, I believe, and she, again, was done with his bullshit and had said she was leaving. I feel like they struggled and he pushed her and she hit her head on something. I don't feel like he killed her on purpose. He was, it was a bad thing, but I don't feel like this was premeditated, but I do feel like he killed her. And then he panicked and freaked out, not that he hadn't thought about it. Obviously he had, this wasn't the way he had envisioned it going down though. And so then he has a dead wife on his hands and he panics. I keep seeing one of those sleds that we used to ride when we were kids, the long orange ones.
The hard plastic one.
Yeah, long, hard plastic sled that would be, about 5 feet-ish long, maybe a little bit longer. I keep seeing her. I feel like what he did is he wrapped her up and basically wrapped her onto one of those sleds and put her in the back of the car. And the boys were told that they were going camping. The boys were told that Mommy was sleeping in the back of the car. Those were things that he said to them, thinking that, he could just make that normal. I don't feel like she bled a lot in the house. I feel like she did bleed in the house. I do feel like the box fans blowing on the couch, we know that they found some traces of blood in the house. I don't feel like she spilled an enormous amount of blood in the house. I feel like, but she did, and obviously he worked to clean that up. I feel like he worked for a long time at the house to bundle her up onto the sled and to get that put together and then to take care of the boys. And, I feel like he woke them up in the middle of the night and loaded them into the car and said, we're going on an adventure. We're going camping. Where's Mommy? She's asleep in the back of the van. I don't think the boys ever saw her. I think they were just told that. I don't think that they actually saw her. I feel like he drove quite a long ways while the kids slept in the van. And I feel like they got left in the van for a while by themselves. They were asleep. Again, this was probably early morning at this point, but I feel like I have this image of him with that sled tied around his waist, trekking out onto the desert to get rid of her. I feel like he did send her down into some kind of a mine shaft or a hole of some sort. I think her remains will be found at some point. I feel like somebody exploring or spelunking or, digging around into dangerous places actually will find her at some point, because I do still think she is out on that desert somewhere. That is a vast place. I feel like she is very far under the earth.
We've been out through that southern Utah desert is a huge place.
And but I do actually think at some point that they will find her. They'll find a body strapped to a sled, because I feel like he pulled her on a sled. And I have this great image of him with her tied, with him with that sled tied around his waist and trekking quite a ways from the van. I feel like the boys were in the van alone for probably 2 hours while he walked. And then he shoved this sled down into some, underground spot, where, and I think that that's probably why she hasn't been found yet, because I think because she was on the sled, that she went down a long ways into some kind of a shaft, because it wasn't just dead weight body. It was something,
Yeah, like to slide. Well, you remember how those sleds, they were fast, man. They went a long ways.
Yeah, I have such a clear image of that sled. Anyway, then I feel like he came back to the van and slept there for a little while until the boys woke up. And then they ate and they messed around for a little while. And he kind of tried to make it like it was fun. We're having fun. We went camping. And then, of course, later that day, they rolled on home. Did Dad know? Yes, Dad knew. I feel like he called Dad after it happened. I feel like he called Stephen after it happened in an absolute panic, and he helped him make the plan that he made. I feel like the decomposed body situation at Topaz Mountain is just a red herring. I don't feel like that was anything to do with this case. I
Okay.
do feel like there were constant breadcrumbs dropped by Stephen and by Josh to confuse the authorities and try and,
Yeah.
create some kind of chaos somewhere. And I feel like the fact that they found some decomp at Topaz Mountain was absolutely by coincidence. I think that they loved every second of it. But here's a real twist, I think, for me. The brother in the car, right?
Yeah.
He did have a dead body in the back of his car. It wasn't Susan.
Wow.
They should have taken a harder look at Stephen. He was, or not Stephen, what was his name? Michael.
Michael.
Michael was as depraved as his dad and his brother. I think he covered it a little bit better. But I do absolutely think that he had, I see a woman that he killed. I feel like this wasn't someone that he knew well. I feel like this was maybe someone who was hitchhiking or a homeless person. This was a woman that was is missing, but is missing from a long ways away that nobody really,
Didn't connect it.
mhm, hasn't made the connection. He buried that body, however. I feel like he did have it in the back of his car for a while he was trying to figure out what to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, believe it or not, I think both of these brothers killed women and disposed of them.
Wow.
I feel like these boys were seriously abused by their dad when they were little. And it wasn't just being exposed to pornography and adult things. I feel like they were sexually abused horrifically when they were little. And then, of course, all of the issues with their parents. Like, this was a house from hell entirely. It's There's a part of me that goes, wow, Josh really wanted to break away from that, really wanted to like have a good life. There was
Mhm.
a part of him that really, really wanted that, but could not shake the snares of his dad and the
Sure.
influence on him and the horror that he went through as a kid. It was just all there, you know. And so, but I do feel like a lot of the stuff, like the websites and the taunting the Powell family and things like that, that was very much Stephen.
Cox family.
Or the Cox family, sorry. Yeah, that was very much Stephen. He was enjoying this to pieces. He thought he was getting a lot of joy, a lot of enjoyment out of watching this happen. And yeah, that's really horrifying. Now, why did Josh decide to just end it all? I feel like he was done. He was done. I feel like he was tired of losing, you know? I don't feel like he was really afraid that he was going to get at some point busted for his wife's murder. He wasn't, you know? He hadn't been busted at that point. They obviously didn't have enough to arrest him.
Right.
Everything that the police looked at for him, he seemed to get away with, except for the
Did.
kids. Except
Yeah.
for the kids. That was the one thing he couldn't win. And I feel like that was the ultimate FU to the Coxes, was to just take them away forever. That's all that was. That wasn't fear. He wasn't afraid he was about to get caught. He wasn't about to get caught. He wasn't. No. No. But I do feel like at some point that Susan's body will surface in Utah. That somebody, you
Wow.
know, some adventure seeker digging around in dark places will actually come across that bundle with her in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know for people still looking for her, because many are.
Yeah.
To
What a
keep that
horrifying
information.
case.
It's just unreal. It's just, when it happened, it was unreal. It was back in 2009. That kind of stuff didn't happen in our area, which,
Yeah.
Salt Lake sort of feels like our area. These kinds of things
Mhm.
didn't seem to get this close to us.
Yeah.
It was, such a horrifying thing for a mother of two little tiny kids to go missing. There was so much empathy and worry about her children. The funny thing is there was suspicion on Josh from the beginning. There really was not any empathy for him. I mean, the whole area in Utah and here in Idaho, people had distrusted him from day one.
Mm-hmm.
His behavior was so weird. Everything that he did was so strange. None of it made sense at all.
Yep.
Can you imagine taking toddlers camping in winter? No sane person would do that, and you just knew he didn't. Just knew he didn't do that.
Those were just the words he used with the kids,
Yep.
to manipulate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you think about, obviously this family is unbelievably depraved. When you look at that, the sisters were still suing not that many years ago to try to get her declared dead so that they could benefit from her life insurance. I mean, after all this, really?
Yeah. It's
so sick.
Unbelievably disgusting. Yeah.
Her poor family, they have been such rock stars. Her dad, especially.
God.
It's really, they've all really stood up for her, but her dad more publicly, and he's the one, that's gone to court against him several times, and all the stuff that he has done to try to defend his daughter and protect his grandchildren. And they did absolutely everything. I cannot imagine how devastated they must be to have lost her and those little boys over all this.
Can you imagine that phone call?
No, I cannot, because I remember when it happened vividly. When it came through on the news, it was so shocking.
Not that it didn't just confirm their greatest fear, because they had fought and fought to prevent this very thing.
Yeah, they knew.
They knew that at some point Josh would hurt those kids. They knew.
Well, and I honestly, as a social worker, I have a great deal of empathy for the social worker that was there at that time.
So scary for her.
The system definitely failed these kids, but it wasn't her fault. She was there doing the court-ordered visitation she was ordered to do. She had no way of knowing he was going to do this.
It's a miracle she lived through it.
It is. It's a miracle that the explosion didn't take her too.
Yeah, entirely.
She stepped away from the house.
But I can only fathom the amount of PTSD she has from that experience.
I cannot imagine what she has been through over it. And then for the Cox family to sue the state, and and I fully understand why they did, because allowing this kind of visitation with this man when they had so much, on him and so much suspicion of him. I get it a lot, but that social worker in the moment was just there for a visitation. She had no way of knowing that he was going to do what he did, and to do it he was so unhinged. You're going to kill yourself and your kids, and you're going to do it by blowing up your house.
And
he had hit them with a hatchet before the house blew up. He was completely out of his mind.
He was completely completely. Yep, he was. It's just unfathomable.
It is. And it's
I was trying to feel into why the hatchet.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hell was the point of that before you blow up the house, right? Because I don't feel like blowing up the house was plan 2 or plan B. That was the A plan. That was happening. I had some weird sense that what I get from that is that he was trying to knock them out so that they wouldn't feel the blast, so that it was a very weird act of attempting to prevent them from having to. It was like, okay, I don't want to use this phrase, but it's what comes up, and it was a very misguided, deranged form of compassion on his part. Like, I'm going to knock them out so that they don't have to feel this. Why a hatchet into the head and face? The guy was crazy. There's no super good answer for that. You can't reason with unreasonable,
Right.
But that's what I'm getting on that, is that he was actually trying to knock them both out so that then he could blow the house up without them experiencing that.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it worked, but.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine they were instantly terrified because they knew.
Right.
What he just did shouldn't have been done. They're a little older now than they were when, and they're living with their grandparents. And so their view of things has shifted, I'm sure. And, he may have needed to subdue them also, just so that they didn't try to run out of the house some way.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, and just the lack of closure on this is so hard. I think I can't imagine being the family, but just even for the community, the lack of closure. I mean, every year you see it in the news. Every year it comes up on the day that she disappeared. It's in the news again. And this year will be 10 years. No, last year was 10 years. 10 years in 2019. So we're almost to 11 years. There's still vigils held for her, and there is a memorial in the same cemetery where her boys were buried. There's a memorial for her there.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Didn't Utah pass a law that's Susan's law? Or maybe it was Washington.
I believe it was Utah. There were some changes in Washington and in Utah, but I do believe that there is a law named after her in Utah that is about not allowing visitation with parents who are under suspicion of murder or something like that.
Kind of interesting in the scope of the Melanie Pulowski custody battle that's going on right now.
Yeah.
So totally switching gears, you guys. I'm sorry, but some of you will understand what I'm talking about. Some of you won't, but I'm referring to the Daybell Vallow case. Melanie Pulowski is the niece of Lori Vallow. She was the ex-wife of a gentleman, or well, she was actually the estranged wife at the time of a man named Brandon Boudreau, who last fall somebody took a shot at and tried to kill.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of suspicion and some evidence that points towards Alex Cox in that case. And
Melanie's uncle.
Yeah, who was Melanie's uncle, and some suspicion that Melanie may have had something to do with that. And ever since that happened, Brandon took their children and went into hiding with them to save his life, which for very good reason. Thank God he did, or he probably would have been killed. And who knows about their kids,
Right. I think also just as much to protect them.
But they've been back to court for custody in Arizona now, 2 or 3 times this year. Yeah. And every time the court has sided with Brandon and his attorney because of this situation. They keep nodding back to this situation where somebody tried to kill Brandon, and they have reasonably good evidence to believe that it could have been Alex, which also obviously helps to implicate that Melanie could have had something to do with it. And the courts have yet to let her have anything with her kids.
Yeah.
Last year.
Which I think is awesome,
Arizona must have it going on as well in some way, because
child protection laws vary by state, but it's quite true in Idaho and Utah that child protection law does favor parental rights over child safety. It does.
Yeah.
We're family reunification states, which means that the ultimate goal is to get children back with their parents, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing, but it gives parents who have children in the system more rights than maybe they should have in situations like this. And you look at this Josh Powell situation as a good example of that.
Yeah,
Washington obviously has some similar laws to Idaho. So yeah, I don't know, and of course hindsight is 2020 in this. I don't think that anyone would have predicted that he would have murdered his children.
Right.
He fought to keep them, but I think you're absolutely right, Katie, that your read on this is that this was an FU to the Cox family and to take those children from them permanently. I don't have any doubt that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And that's just so sick. But you know what? I hope somebody does find her. I hope at least there's that closure.
I do feel like that happens. When? I don't know. Yeah. Timing is weird, and I don't think I can predict it, but I do feel like it happens.
Good.
Your family at least gets that.
Yeah. Well, we were asked to cover the Susan Powell case. It was a case that's been brought up in our YouTube comments several times. So thank you for suggesting cases. Please feel free to continue to do that. We do want you to suggest unsolved cases, because that's what we cover on this show. But feel free to keep suggesting them, and we always take them into consideration. But this was one that I felt like, it's time. It's time for us to talk about it, particularly because we lived in the time that it happened in an area where it was covered so heavily and was so, it was very well known around here. And so I think it's nice to hear your take on where she is and what happened, and those things.
What a case. Wow.
Yeah. Well, you know, as always, you can find us over on Facebook. We're True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. We also have a discussion group over there by the same name. You can find us there. If you are listening on a podcast platform and would like to watch the show, you can. We are on YouTube. We're True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters there as well. And you're welcome to come and watch the show and comment. We love to hear what you all think about these things. Somebody's going to correct me on something. That always happens every single case. Not every single case, but occasionally. These cases with a lot of information. It's, you know, and I know somebody out there is a hardcore Susan Powell junkie and they're going to correct me on something, but that's okay. We are true crime fans just like you all are. And so we love to know what's up with this, with these cases, and we love suggestions. So that's the way to suggest a case to us. Come watch us on YouTube and make a comment, and we do keep an eye on those. We are over on Patreon, so if you would like to support us and help us keep doing what we're doing, you can go over there and become a patron. And when you do, you get access to free content, to exclusive content that is nobody but our patrons get to see. So yeah, it's a great way to get some extra content if you love the show.
It's true. Our patrons this month got something super fun.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah. We did a battle.
We did. We did a cold read battle.
Yep.
Yeah. And we left it up to the listeners to decide who won. So, you know, might want to go join Patreon so you can see that show and you can decide if I won or if Katie won. I don't know. I mean,
or if it was a draw.
Or if it was a draw. Katie said maybe the listeners won because they got to hear 10 cold reads in one show. It's possible. Possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here with us, guys. We really appreciate it. We are True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters, and we will be back with another great case. Have a good week.
Thanks, guys. Take care.